Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope everybody is having a beautiful week. It was a bright, sunny, chilly, windy day here in Madeira Beach, Florida. I'm enjoying my time with my parents. They're going to be here for a while. I keep reminding myself that, you know what, Ed, they're going to be here for a while. Because they've already been here for like 10 days already. And we got to the end of March, and I think I'm going to be really enjoying that whole time. I've seen them every day. We have dinner together, sit around, watch Family Feud, Jeopardy, The Wheel of Fortune, watch a little of those mystery shows on the ID channel. Although I was distressed to find out a few days ago that my dad is not a big fan of the movie The Magnificent Seven. The guy usually has some pretty good movie taste, but we found that on the TV a few days ago, and I don't think he could have been more bored by it. It was moving just a little too slow for him. In addition, we found The Usual Suspects on there, and he didn't particularly care for that either. But I'm telling you, trust me, his movie taste is pretty good. But so I'm having a good time with them. By the way, I also have a disc golf tournament coming out up this week, and I haven't played in a disc golf tournament since beginning of September last year. Just have been a little too busy, been concentrating on some other things, and frankly, I haven't even been practicing that much or playing. Just writing to do, marketing to do. I just told myself I need to take some of these other things, give them a little bit more time than I've been giving them. But I think I'm going to do okay this weekend. If I don't play well, I'm not going to beat myself up, unlike what is usually the case where if I play well, I am in my car and out of there within 5 minutes of my last putt. That's usually how it goes. I don't think I'm going to be like that this weekend. My expectations are not that high. I just hope that the weather's decent and it's not too windy. Before I get started, you can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com, and you can tweet me during the show or tweet about the show as you're listening. That would be kind of cool. At Dentzel Domain, all one word, no space in between. So let's get to the show. Yesterday, Barack Obama issued his executive orders regarding the purchase of guns, and I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of the specifics of these. I think I've read enough about it. I know what they are. But what I see coming from both my side and the other side is that nobody seems to be really very happy with this. Of course, for us, we're saying that these laws aren't going to stop anything. Really, all they do is give regular, law-abiding citizens a harder time. And on the left, it's pretty much the same thing. That they don't like them because they don't believe that they're going to do anything. Of course, they look at it as these laws don't go far enough. And usually when you have that type of legislation where both sides seem to not like it, in a lot of circles, that's considered to be good legislation. If somebody can find something in it that they don't like, both sides, that's considered to be a very good compromised, fair-minded part of legislation. The real problem in this and what he did is nobody can find, although both sides hate it, neither can find anything in it that they like. In fact, the only people that you can really find who like anything about this are people who don't know what the heck's going on. You'll for example, you hear a bunch of Hollywood types within the last 2 days talking about how they're happy that what Barack Obama done. Of course, none of them know anything. But the left isn't happy, and you can see why they're not happy. And it's not because it's kind of because these laws, what they would say, don't go far enough, but this is an executive order. Barack Obama has a wide-ranging amount of choices of how far that he can go with something like this. And it's funny, yesterday I was talking to my dad about executive orders and just reading to him what they are. They are not necessarily rules from on high that can't be challenged or anything like that. They're not like that at all. But still, the president has a lot of choices regarding this on how far he wants to go. And that Barack Obama only went as far as he did is interesting to me. Now, he's not running for re-election, as you know, as you should know already. And I've told you that we as conservatives have continued to win the gun battle, the proverbial gun battle in the United States. More guns than ever are being purchased. In fact, I was watching Fox Business. We're going to get to the stock market, I think, before this is all over today. But I was watching Fox Business. Stuart Varney was saying that Barack Obama is the best gun salesman that has ever existed. It's true. A lot of people worried about what's going on. And like I've said, since I think Paris in particular, I know that's what caught my attention, was that, people figured out, if I'm going to be eating some restaurant and some terrorist is going to come in there, I think I'd like to be armed. If I can legally be armed, then I'm going to be armed. Never shot a gun in my life, never owned a gun, but I don't want to go out and I don't want to die the way a lot of those people did in Paris. And then on top of that, you had what happened in San Bernardino, same thing. I don't want to go to a Christmas party, some office party, some jilted employee who has his mind bent on jihad and his wife come in there and shoot the place up. So that's helped as well. And dare I say it, no matter who had been president when those things happened, I think gun sales would have gone up. But on top of that, we know that gun sales have been through the roof even before that happened. But I think the recent surge is due to those two particular incidences. So get back to the question, why didn't he go farther than this? If he could do anything that he wanted, why is it, we're going to take a look at people who are mentally challenged, maybe not right in the head about their purchases, and then anybody who purchases or sells a gun is considered to be in the business of selling guns, so they're going to have to do background checks. And I know that's a pain. I'm not necessarily for it, but when you think about what he could have done, it's not so bad. Now, see, down deep, I think in places that Barack Obama doesn't want to talk about. In fact, I would go as far to say that maybe even his wife and his close advisors like Valerie Jarrett don't even know this. But down deep in places that Barack Obama doesn't like to talk about, being that I know what he could have done and he didn't, he knows this is all BS. I think he knows that. If he was a true believer that really, really, really strict gun control in the United States would stop gun crimes, he would do it. And he would go to the wall on it, and he'd be saying, you judges, you want to overturn my executive order? Go ahead. You want to do this? You want to do that? I don't care about the NRA. This is really what I believe. But he didn't. And that's why I've kind of suspected for a while that all this talk about gun control from him and other politicians like him is nothing but politics. Now, when it comes to Gun Control Inc., Handgun Control Inc., and the Brady Group and some of these other gun control groups, I think that they are true believers. This executive order tells me that Barack Obama is not a true believer. in gun control. I know that he's talked about it, and I know Hillary Clinton's talked about it, but it's just funny to me when he has a chance to really, really do something, especially on the heels of what happened to San Bernardino, this is what he does. And I don't believe that he's tempered this executive order because he's afraid of what it might do to fellow Democrats come November, because we know that he doesn't think like that. He's perfectly fine with Democrats in the House and Senate losing at the expense of him. Let's keep that in mind. So he couldn't have done anything, but he didn't. Just a little nibbling around the edges, and everybody just throws their hands up in the air and says, why even bother? Really, I mean, in the end, it's like, why even bother? There's another part to this as well, and it goes just to the principle of executive orders, and I looked those up. A lot of executive orders have been issued over the years, going back to George Washington. But it seems they really picked up once big government started getting bigger, particularly in the 1930s and on. And every president since then has issued a lot of them. A lot of them, I'm sure, that probably us on the right would like, some of us on the right would hate, and a lot of in between. A lot of them that left would love, left would hate, and a lot where you're just left scratching your head. Ronald Reagan issued a lot of executive orders. I didn't go in and look in what each one said, but he issued a lot of them. But I know what I think of regarding this executive order with Barack Obama and any of the others that have caused us as conservatives to become disgusted, and we talk about the breakdown of the Constitution. I think when I hear that, I start thinking, you know what? We are winning. I know that's an odd way to think. That how can you say that we're winning when you have a liberal president issues an executive order on gun control, going around the Congress, just ignoring what the popular sentiment is in the United States, because a majority of people in the United States do want to own guns for various reasons. Some are, complete gun rights people, and some people, they just say, you know what, I just want to have a gun in case somebody breaks into my house. Outside of that, maybe they don't believe in concealed carry or open carry or anything like that, but owning a gun within the confines of your house, a majority of Americans believe that. It's obvious to me that Barack Obama doesn't want to have this argument. See, when somebody, in our personal lives, when you have an argument with somebody, and then in the end, they just say, well, I'm just going to do it my way, and, I'm not going to listen to you. Don't you automatically think, well, it sounds to me like I won the argument. It's just this other person just isn't willing to give in. Doesn't it? It kind of does. It's no different than, there's a reason that the husband goes to the strip club without telling his wife. Why? Because he can't win that argument. There is no logical way that he can bring up to his wife that she's going to understand, and it's going to all make sense that he needs to go to the strip club that night and leave her at home. Nothing. But you know what? He can go and just ignore telling her at all, which is kind of what like an executive order is. You know why there's an argument, by the way, in that husband and wife case? Because the husband doesn't want to hear it. He knows his wife is right. He just doesn't want to hear it. That's what it is with us. Barack Obama, that's the way I'm starting to look at this. And the problem is that we as conservatives, over the last 7 years, we haven't been able to use any of these to our political benefit. I know that we've taken over the House, and, the Senate's in Republican control, and there are 35 Republican governors out there, and a large majority of the state legislatures are Republican, and that's all good. But I don't know if we've adequately made this argument that these executive orders are a sign that he doesn't want to argue with us. Why doesn't he want to argue with us? I would say because he thinks we might just win. And in fact, when it comes to even these very, very light gun control measures that he made executive orders yesterday, he doesn't even have the courage to argue with us on those. That should tell you something. He just doesn't want to hear it. He, I think, is afraid that having on this particular topic, now there may be other topics where the situation is a little bit different, but on the topic of guns in the United States, he does not want to have a real conversation, a real argument, not a conversation, I sound like liberals, a real argument with conservatives over gun legislation, because I think he knows would win. Hey, if he knows that gun sales are up in the United States, if I know, he knows. If I know that the blue areas in the United States are the most violent areas where there is the most gun control, then he knows. Few more reasons why he has to do this by executive order, and he can't do it by the normal processes in which gun laws or any laws are passed or repealed. We need to granted, he only has a year left, and who knows who's going to be the next president, but we as conservatives, I think we need to start looking at these executive orders. And I know that they're horrible for how people are going to understand how our government works. And I know that sucks. But we have to find a way to politically benefit from this. And I think that we have to look deeper into why these are being done. Why you just can't win. And we need to go, to stop myself right in the middle of a sentence, I even have it written out in my notes. See, if it were me, and I was in the Senate, in the House, and this happened, I know what I would do. I'd hope that some reporters would show up to see me do this. I would just go out there and taunt Barack Obama to no end regarding this. Because I think I know who Barack Obama is. He thinks he's smarter than everybody. Like from last week, talking about Jerry Seinfeld. Even with Jerry Seinfeld, I'm sure he's thinking to himself, you know what, I'm a pretty funny guy too. The two of us sitting here in my limo, I probably could be the funnier of me and Jerry Seinfeld. I know he's made a lot of money making people laugh, but I've made a lot of people laugh too. Barack Obama, smartest guy, smartest person in any room that he's in his opinion. Funniest guy, coolest guy, most athletic, most knowledgeable, best with the women, on and on and on. And that's a little bit how he's a little bit different from Bill Clinton. But I would get out there and I would use that kind of ego and arrogance to my benefit to taunt him and say, here's the guy, thinks he's the smartest, thinks he has command of all of these topics from Iran to China to Obamacare, everything else, and he can't even confront us in a constitutional way on these very small gun control laws. He doesn't think that he could win this argument with the American people regarding this. He's the one who thinks that he's so smart. We're just these, we know how much he looks down upon us here in the House or in the Senate. I would taunt him to no end. And I would, as much as I could, almost force him to respond. If it would mean that I'd have to go on some sort of filibuster, not an actual filibuster, but where I was just up in front of the cameras and just line after line after line about talking about it and not allowing the reporters, that would just be so good that the reporters wouldn't be able to walk away and turn their cameras off because it would be so compelling. They'd know that they were watching great news. They know that they were covering what could be the start of a very interesting argument between myself and the White House. But that's how I would go about it. Try to bait him into having this conversation, starting with, look at him. He thinks that he can overrun us. He thinks he's smarter than us. And here, on something like this, he doesn't even have the courage to argue with us. But he's the one who's supposed to be so dang smart. And see, I think that, once again, you don't hear this anywhere. Because here's what we have to learn as conservatives. The more arguments we have with liberals, the more it helps us. As long as we stick to our values. That's the way I see it. I know that there are a bunch of crazy kooks in this country. We're not going to be able to save them. But I really believe the more arguments that we have with liberals regarding all of these topics, the better. Unfortunately, we allow them to get away with not having arguments. And these executive orders are a part of that. I mean, we get so wound up in talking about the Constitution, which is important. We get so worried, we get so caught up in talking about how the presidency and imperial presidency, the regime, all these funny words, all these great lines the conservative media types have been using for years. We forget that there are elections to win, and I think that we forget that when people avoid arguing with us, it doesn't help us. We need to start making that point more. There's just something there. And we taunt him about the Constitution, whereas he's not bothered by that. What he would be bothered by is being taunted about his own intelligence and his own capabilities as being president. Us banging away at him about this is unconstitutional, that doesn't bother him at all because he doesn't care. What he does care about is his own ego. And in fact, if he was a different type of president, it would be the opposite. If he was a person that cared about the Constitution and had no ego, then you confront him on the Constitution if he does something wrong. Right? You hit him where he is, not where you want to be, not where you want to punch. You punch him where it hurts the most. In punching him in his conservative parts doesn't help us. It doesn't hurt him because he doesn't care. One more reason that I think we just dropped the ball. I've been watching a lot of World War II stuff. Always have. A lot of stuff on YouTube. Documentaries, all sorts of documentaries. And what's fascinating to me is something like the Battle of Midway, where the Japanese thought they had the perfect plan. Going to do this fake little thing up in the Aleutian Islands near Alaska, but really our target is Midway, and we're going to bait the Americans to come in there to protect that island, and then we're going to pounce on them when they come to the defense of the Midway Island. Whereas we, the Americans, We had broken their codes, and we knew it was all going to happen, and we were the ones that jumped on them. And it was this, 8 months after Pearl Harbor, Japan was already on the run. I think that, it was Pearl Harbor December 7th, and halfway through to 1942, the Imperial Navy was already on the run because of Midway. We as conservatives, we've never been able to set up liberals that way politically, where we have baited them into a situation where they thought that they were getting the upper hand, whereas we were. And we should be able to do that because we have history on our side. We have the facts on our side. They do not. They have rhetoric on their side. They have outrageous claims on their side. They have a majority of the media on their side, but they certainly do not have history and facts and things on their side. And although you can ignore history and facts for a while, eventually gravity will jump up and bite you. You can only ignore it for so long. And because of that, because in, debate competitions, and even if you've ever had, you knew that an argument was going to go down with your husband or wife or a coworker or your boss, you usually go into it thinking, how can I bait this person into saying something that I can pounce upon? I think I have the better argument, but how do I prove it? How do I prove that this person has a double standard, is a hypocrite, doesn't see things the right way? We all do that in our everyday lives. In fact, probably the guy who wants to go to the strip club but doesn't have the courage to tell his wife, maybe even for a while he tries to figure out a way to bait her into agreeing that he's allowed to go to the strip club. Of course, I don't know if there's any particular way to do that. I've never been married. So we know in our personal lives, we do that. We do that. We want to get the upper hand, and we want the other person to walk into our trap. We as conservatives, we've never been able to do that with liberals. But to me, this executive orders stuff that's been going on for years haven't been able to take advantage of it. Because liberals and Barack Obama think they're getting the upper hand, much like the Midway example. They're the Japanese. They're going to lure us into something to defend an island, whereas we need to outmaneuver them. We can't stop the executive orders, but we should be able to find out a good debate way to make those executive orders, especially when it comes to something like gun control, turn it to our benefit. Whereas they think that they're getting the upper hand by the executive orders, where really they're walking into our trap. And if, there's only a year left, so I don't know what you can do. But I think the trap with Barack Obama, and I've said it since before he was president, the trap for him is setting him up to show that side of him, that ego side, that taunting side, the arrogant side. I've given the example of Jack Nicholson and, standing up during the movie A Few Good Men and finally saying that he ordered the code red, just like Tom Cruise predicted. He ordered that code red, and he was happy to do it. This is who I believe Barack Obama has been his whole life. We just haven't been able to bait him into it. Because I think that we've been too eager to talk about the law. Even though I know that's important, he doesn't care about the law, so there's no use talking to him about it. However, there is the point of talking to him about his own arrogance. And using that blind spot, because as I've said, arrogance and self-awareness rarely go hand in hand. That comes from the movie, the first James Bond movie with Daniel Craig, Casino Royale. Arrogance and self-awareness rarely go hand in hand. Barack Obama is not very self-aware because he's arrogant, and we've never been able to use it against him. And these executive orders over the years should have been a way for us to take advantage of that. We haven't. And that's our fault. But I got to go to the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Red State Talk Radio, feeding the hunger.
Hey, this is Alfonso Rachel with PJTV, Zo Nation, and the founder and drummer of 20 Pound Sledge, and you're listening to RedStateTalkRadio.com, the dominant force in conservative internet talk radio.
I'm a mom, and just like millions of other women, that's why I own guns. We're responsible, we're law-abiding, and we're everything that makes America strong. Every day we're willing to use a firearm to defend our families. But the media will never tell those stories. If a mom puts a gun to the face of a home-invading thug and makes him run for his life, the story gets buried. But if she's unarmed and murdered, the cameras will be at the scene before the police. It's time for moms like me to speak out. We are the majority. We demand the freedom to defend our families, and we challenge the media to tell the truth about our rights. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
What does it mean for a country when its citizens turn on the news and expect to be misled? Because the reporters who once served as freedom's fearless watchdogs feel like distant characters in a fading memory. Today, too many journalists are just actors, playing to their boss's script. Why tell the truth when you can sell a lie for more? There's a price to pay for all this dishonesty. If the free press won't protect free people, it's our job to demand they do it. Do the work you say you do. Aim your First Amendment against hypocrisy and corruption like a hammer of the people. Kick down the doors of any leader who deceives us, and never tolerate dishonesty from your own ranks. That's what the good guys demand. We're the 5 million men and women in the National Rifle Association of America, and we will not play along. Join us today.
This is Don Newen with Cowboy Logic Radio, and if you don't go to bed every night absolutely fatigued from trying to restore America from the destruction that is taking place, then you're simply not doing enough. Join me late night, Tuesday, early Wednesday, 12:05 a.m. for Cowboy Logic Radio on RedStateTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to make a couple additional points regarding this executive orders from Barack Obama. And this is kind of a companion piece. This comes from Kevin Williamson at National Review. And he makes the point that Barack Obama is still looking for his Newt Gingrich. And what that's a reference to is back in the 90s that Bill Clinton needed somebody like Newt Gingrich as a foil, as a worthy opponent, so that Bill Clinton could play off of Newt Gingrich and portray Republicans as the bad guys. Now, in that battle, you know what ended up happening was the two actually ended up working together decently well. And some truly good legislation got passed in those years. No matter what else you might think about Bill Clinton, despite him being a scoundrel in many different ways, not just with women and his wife. But Bill Clinton's a little bit different in that policy was actually, I think, decently important to him. And the image of what people thought of him, was very important. And that's where the whole idea about governing through polls got started, it seems, at least in recent political history. He'd just put his finger out and see which way the American people were thinking, what they were thinking about a certain topic, and he'd take that as his position, which is not the strongest way to lead. But Kevin Williamson says that Barack Obama is trying to make, with these executive orders, is trying to make the NRA his Newt Gingrich. He's trying to make them the boogeyman. Whereas back in the 90s, Bill Clinton tried to make Newt Gingrich the boogeyman, and might have, you could say, at least succeeded a little bit with the government shutdown that happened back then. And, of course, some people would say that Republicans truly never did recover from what happened and the negative response that all got. And it still hampers them to this day, even though a lot of those people who were in Congress, the Republicans who were in Congress at the time, aren't in Congress now. Maybe that's a topic for another day. So, going back to my Midway example from the first part of the show, it seems to me that Barack Obama is trying to set up these executive orders regarding gun control as his Midway. That he wants the NRA to come in and be against these executive orders, and then Barack Obama is going to try to spring some sort of trap on the NRA and the rest of gun owners. I can see that. See, they do try to do it to us, even though we don't try to do it to them. He wants the NRA to come in and blast all of this, and then Barack Obama is going to say, hey, see, I have some decent legislation. I could have gone so much farther than I did, being that this is an executive order. Just a little nibbling around the edges and things, and even that the NRA won't even go for. That's what he's trying to do. That's what he's trying to do. And it's, if you read enough websites out there, at this point, maybe it's succeeding at least a little bit. We'll see. It's a little early right now, just the day after, to really be able to read what's going to happen. But as I said at the start of this, nobody is happy with this. Nobody thinks that this is going to solve anything, but the NRA, and I love the NRA, might feel obligated to come out against all of this. And it should be. They should be against it. Because, once again, it doesn't do anything. But Barack Obama is hoping that the NRA and other gun rights groups, and just regular citizens, really come out against it so he can say, look, I'm trying to be reasonable here, and these people just not reasonable. I'm not trying to seize anybody's guns. I'm not trying to take any guns. I'm not trying to ban guns. And even that is too much for these people. You see how that works. Now, what is the counter to that? The counter to it is what I said at the beginning of the show. You need to counter that with, well, if these make so much sense, then why don't you just do it by executive order? If they make so much sense and they're so easy to understand and they just nibble around the edges, why did you just do it on your own? Why didn't you try to have a fight with the Congress regarding this? To which Barack Obama say, well, I can't talk to these people. And then you say, well, that's the way this country's supposed to work. See how I flipped that around? Barack Obama wants to set up his own version of the Battle of Midway, whereas the NRA, gun rights owners, they need to switch it around and do their own version of Midway, where they're the Americans seizing upon this opportunity that the Japanese presented to them. Remember, Midway never happens if the Japanese don't start that. Who knows where the next encounter, what the encounter would have been with the Japanese during World War II if they don't try to go after Midway. Eventually, obviously, the Americans and the Japanese were going to clash somewhere, but it might not have been as decisive of a battle. Who knows? We'll never know. That's alternative history. But it was the Japanese that set it up, and they were the ones that walked into the trap. You have to learn to do that with people. You have to learn to do that in politics. And that's how I would turn that around. He wants us to come and defend gun rights and attack what he's done. There's a way to do that and spin it around by saying, you're the one that claims these are reasonable changes. If they're so reasonable, why didn't you go to the Congress with them? And you'll say, well, the NRA, all these politicians are in the pockets and everything else. Yes, maybe. But the way our government works is supposed to be, if you have an idea, you bring it to the Congress and you talk about it. Even if you think that you're going to get turned down somewhere down the road. Well, we don't want to risk one more shooting. But you just said that just nibble around the edges, and all these other people out here are saying it won't do anything anyway. So how many shootings would occur between the time you thought of it and it was actually enacted? If it ever gotten enacted? Probably none. You're the one that says that they're reasonable changes. I just think that there's a way to spin that all around. And you can use Barack Obama's timidity, and there's a first one, timidity, Timidite, his weakness, his shyness, you could even call it, in these decisions, these executive orders against him. But I just don't know if this is something that I talk about in this show often. We talk about the liberals using the same playbook. Guess who also continues to use the same playbook? We do. And then we start talking about the Constitution and gun rights, and those are all great topics. They're just not great topics for this guy. You don't want to go to the Congress because you got Obamacare passed, and you can't get this stuff passed. Really? I thought you were the smartest guy to ever be president. You were just on a show with Jerry Seinfeld, and you agreed with him that you are the coolest president. Now, how cool is it to just make decisions on your own? See, that's where you need him, and you never have to bring up the Constitution or not at all. It's frustrating. I have to tell you, it's frustrating. And this, I guess for me, the reason I look at it differently is because I've encountered people like Barack Obama before in my life. Not recently. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was around liberals a lot more than I am now. You have to figure out where your opponent is and attack him or her there. Remember, if you're trying to communicate with somebody, you need to use that person's language, not your own language. You need to talk to them in a language they understand. And you know what language Barack Obama understands? Arrogance. Egotism. Or egoism. Selfishness. He understands all of that, so that's the way you have to talk to him. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and that stuff, don't even bother. Have I talked about this topic enough tonight? We just need to change our attitude toward these executive orders. And I think that if our attitude changed, I'm not saying that we need to think they're great, but we need to see them as an opportunity to further our agenda, which is the correct agenda for the United States, instead of just shivering and worrying about how our Constitution is going down the crapper. These are opportunities if we are willing to take advantage of them. Let's move on to something else. Hillary Clinton. Once again, this is kind of an opportunity if anybody out there wants to take advantage of it. Hillary Clinton did an interview with Chris Matthews. And to Chris Matthews' credit, he asked Hillary Clinton the same question that he asked Debbie Wasserman Schultz months ago about what's the difference between a socialist and a Democrat. You remember that? I talked about it at the time. I think I linked to a video on edwarddentzel.com. And she never does answer the question. Now, of course, Debbie Wasserman Schultz kind of blows the question off, and is the way I remember it, just acts like, well, that's just such an outrageous question that you'd ever ask me something like that. Well, Chris Matthews found the courage to ask Hillary Clinton the same thing, and dare I say it, her answer was not a ton better. All she ends up saying is, well, I'm not a socialist. She goes, instead, she calls herself a progressive Democrat. Well, what's the difference? I'm not sure. I don't know if there is any. This is an opportunity for us, if you want to talk about it. See, you have to keep in mind something regarding all of this, and not just with Hillary Clinton, but before with Chris Matthews, with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and I'm going to guess that even before this became a topic, other media types have brought up this issue of, well, what's the difference between a socialist Democrat? I'm sure that many of us on the right have been asking that question for decades. You have to remember something. Democrats do not view themselves as socialists. The only reason Chris Matthews, who is a lefty, the only reason he asks that question is because he does see a difference between Democrats and socialists. That's why he asks the question. You have to get inside his head first. Not inside Debbie Wasserman Schultz's head, not in Hillary Clinton's head. You have to get in mind of Chris Matthews' head, because he's the one answering the question, but we know that he is no different than those two women. They all think basically the same thing about the United States. Regarding abortion, Obamacare, the Middle East, the minimum wage, the EPA, on and on and on. They virtually think the same on everything. But the only information we can deduce outside of these conversations is what Chris Matthews thinks. And the only way he would ask this question is if he believes there is a difference between Democrats and socialists. And that's what I've been trying to tell all of you. Liberals do not see themselves as kooks. They do not look, I've been saying this since I got on Red State Talk Radio, they do not look at the regimes in China and the Soviet Union, or even, to a degree, present-day Russia. They do not look at Hugo Chavez and all of these other dictators and socialist dictators that have killed millions all the years, and look at them and see themselves. Even though I made the point last week or the week before about Hugo Chavez, about how liberals love dictators, they do not in their heads make the total connection. That's the only way that Chris Matthews can ask that question. I'll just, to give you an example of what I mean, think about the opposite. What's the difference between a Democrat and a capitalist? Now, if he asked that question, these women would come up with whole hosts of answers. Right? They would. But in asking that, you would know that Chris Matthews thinks that there is a difference between Democrats and capitalists, right? Well, then you can only make the same analogy that he thinks that Democrats and socialists are not the same thing. Where it's obvious to the rest of us, they kind of are. And that's why it can be so frustrating when arguing with a liberal. Never take for granted that they are accurate reviewers of themselves. This goes back to that arrogance and self-awareness thing that I talked about with Barack Obama. Liberals are arrogant, thus they are not self-aware, thus they don't make the total connection between socialism, at least in Chris Matthews' head, that he doesn't, between Democrats and socialists. He sees everything the Democrats want to do as being non-socialist. Now, for Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, it very well could be the same thing. Very well could be. And in Hillary's case, the reason that she doesn't just come out and say, oh, that's incredible, of course I'm not a socialist. You know why? Because she knows, even though she doesn't think of herself as a socialist, she needs the socialist vote to win. So even though she may not consider herself to be a socialist, she realizes that, you know what, a lot of socialists have the potential to vote for her, which should tell her something. Probably won't register. And in that way, there's just a disconnect between what Democrats do, the laws that they pass, and how they view themselves. And see, that's the difference between them and us. I think as conservatives, we are much more self-aware, and I think that's why when you get good conservative legislation, it goes along with our values. And we'll say, yes, that was capitalism, that was free market, that goes along with our social values, on and on and on. Whereas when liberals pass some sort of socialist legislation, whether it's a minimum wage increase or Obamacare, they'd make no connection between that and socialism at all. And all of you out there, have to remember that when you get into arguments, discussions with liberals and start throwing that socialist word around. All right? The word socialist, as far as it being a word, is only thrown around with pride by certain groups in the world. Okay? In the United States, it's thrown around by a bunch of idiots who have no idea what they're talking about. They're not really social. They take great pride, but they're not. Bernie Sanders talks about being a socialist. I think if we looked at his finances, we'd find out he's not. It's thrown around there, and then it's thrown around all over Europe because it's a sense of pride over there. That just shows you how much difference there is between us and them. And in China and some of these other countries, a socialist is a source of pride, using that word. It isn't here. Only idiots use that term and take pride in it. Just got to remember that. But Chris Matthews does not see the difference between Democrats and socialists. And so you can only infer from that your average Democrat doesn't see the difference at all, even though we on the right see them as being the same. Just got to remember that. But before I go, I want to remind you, you can find my books on Amazon.com. You can do a search for Edward Dentzel and download the books in a matter of moments. You can go to edwarddentzel.com, where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can go to edwarddentzel.com/book to download the free first chapter of my next book that's called The Comebacks. You can find my shows at Podbean, YouTube, and SoundCloud the day after they play on Red State Talk Radio. Please email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Twitter account, Dentzel Domain, all one word. No space in between. And then finally, you can find me on LinkedIn and on Facebook. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you tonight. I will return You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.